Viewer discretion is advised.
Y'all, I had no idea that engineering crimes would be the gateway to the story that I have been yearning to tell since 12-year-old me saw Jack kiss Rose on the bow of the Titanic.
Oh, God.
Yep.
So good.
I might have to watch that movie tonight. Mm-hmm. This is one of the largest engineering failures in history, and we're going to dive into it, pun intended.
No, it's cold.
I know.
Take your shoes off first.
Ugh, that's not going to help you. So, for those of you who have been raised in an M. Night Shyamalan's The Village style environment, the Titanic was a ship. A ship built, or at least, like, folks were told, to be an engineering marvel that would change sea travel forever.
Do you know my house was built the same year that the Titanic sailed/sank?
1912?
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
My house is 100 years old. Actually, it was built in 1911.
Yeah, your house is more than 100 years old because it's 2022.
Yeah.
Queen. That's an old house. This old house.
No, it was 1921 it was built.
Oh, then 10 years almost after. 9 years after.
Either way, math. Woohoo!
That's all right.
I'm an engineer.
So the British ocean liner was built by the White Star Line as one of 3 luxury ships, the Olympic, the Britannic, and the Titanic.
Wow.
These were the biggest ships they had ever built for their fleet. Sorry, I'm burping. Whew. Which at the time, like around 1912, included 29 ships. They needed these new ships to be groundbreaking because they were lagging behind their competition in steamers, a company called Cunard, which built the famous Lusitania and Mauretania in 1906. And these were known worldwide as the... the Lusitania is like a very famous ship.
They're both famous, but I think it's funny to...
But it is funny to think about a famous ship.
Famous ships.
I know. Well, the Titanic, arguably the most famous ship. There's one.
And the Edmund Fitzgerald.
Well, right. There's a handful. And the SS Sulphur Queen. So these were known worldwide as the fastest passenger ships available at the time. So to show them up, White Star decided not to necessarily focus on speed, although they did focus on speed as well, but rather size and luxury amenities.
Ooh.
The ships were constructed by the Belfast shipbuilders Harland and Wolff, who had been White Star's go-to designers, like basically the Chip and Joanna Gaines of ships, since the 1860s.
That's where shiplap came from.
Shiplap. So their approach was Wolff would dream big and draw an over-the-top sketch of the potential ship, and Harland would basically reverse engineer it and draw up plans to make it an actual seaworthy vessel.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I like that tactic.
This had worked pretty well for them. As for their budget, it didn't super exist.
Thank God.
They were just kind of told to do their thing, and then White Star would make it work, Tim Gunn. They would just allocate funds. Quote, in the case of the Olympic class ships, a cost of £3 million, which would be approximately £310 million in 2019, for the first 2 ships was agreed, plus extras to contract and the usual 5% fee. So Wolff and what's-his-face, Harland, would get 5% on top of a fee for themselves for doing the designs on top of the cost of building everything.
Oh, okay.
So this is from Wikipedia, quote, Harland and Wolff put their leading designers to work designing the Olympic-class vessels. The design was overseen by Lloyd Peary, a director of both Harland and Wolff and the White Star Line, naval architect Thomas Andrews, the managing director of Harland and Wolff's design department, Edward Wilding, Andrews' deputy and responsible for calculating the ship's design, stability, and trim, and Alexander Carlisle, the shipyard's chief draftsman and general manager. Carlisle's responsibilities included the decorations, equipment. We'll get to the decorations. I have so many photos on the drive.
Thank God.
Like the most I've ever included.
The only thing I want to pay attention to are the decorations. I'm going into your folder
because we're going to talk about the amenities. It's fabulous. So, equipment and all general arrangements, including the implementation of an efficient lifeboat design.
So efficient.
Yeah, which we'll get to.
Wow, you do have so many pictures.
So on July 29th of 1908, Harlan and Wolff presented the drawings to J. Bruce Ismay and other White Star Line executives. Ismay approved the design and signed 3 letters of agreement 2 days later, authorizing the start of construction. At this point, the first ship, which was later to become the Olympic, had no name but was referred to simply as number 400, as it was Harlan and Wolff's 400th hull. The Titanic was based on a revised version of this same design and was given the number 401. Titanic was 882 feet and 9 inches long, with a maximum breadth of 92 feet and 6 inches.
Wow.
Her total height, measured from the base of the keel to the top of the bridge, was 104 feet. She measured 46,328 gross register tons, and with a draft of 34 feet, 7 inches. She displaced 52,310 tons of water.
Wow.
She was a big girl.
She was a big girl.
All 3 of the Olympic-class ships had 10 decks, excluding the top of the officers' quarters, which were pretty lavish.
10?
8 of which were for passenger use. 2 of which were like equipment and steerage, basically.
So 8 decks stacked vertically like this?
10.
Oh my God.
8 for passengers.
She is a big girl.
She had 3 main engines heated by burning coal, which we all know from the iconic scenes of the film were absolute hell to power.
Oh, yeah.
And all shoveled into these massive coal-burning stoves by fucking hand.
Ugh.
The Titanic had multiple bunkers that could hold over 7,000 tons of coal to keep the ship operating for its long voyages. Quote,
Christ.
the furnaces required over 600 tons of coal a day. The carbon footprint was not small.
No.
To be shoveled into them by hand, requiring the services of 176, they called them firemen, but they were like the people shoveling coal, working around the clock.
Jesus.
100 tons of ash a day had to be disposed of by ejecting it into the sea.
Oh, where it just disappeared.
Coal ash, yeah, where it just dissolved and didn't have any effect, I'm sure. The work was relentless, dirty, and dangerous, and although firemen were paid relatively generously for the time, there was a high rate of suicide among those who worked in that capacity, and how could there fucking not be?
God.
So while these poor bastards were down below contemplating ending their own lives and shoveling coal, the wealthy elite above were enjoying the most lavish amenities known to man on a ship at the time, literally using the Ritz Hotel as inspiration for the ship.
Oh, good.
First-class amenities included a 7-foot deep saltwater swimming pool, a gymnasium, a squash court, and a Turkish bath, which comprised electric bath, steam room, cool room, massage room, and hot room. Which sounds incredible.
I love how they really wanted a saltwater swimming pool on this.
On the ocean. This frigid ocean.
Liner.
Yeah. A lounge in the style of the Palace of Versailles.
Cute.
An enormous reception room. A men's smoking room, men only.
Mm-hmm.
And a reading and writing room where they would allow the women to read. There were multiple...
But not right.
There were multiple dining experiences. Excuse me. And this wine is making me burpy. Including an a la carte restaurant, again in the style of the Ritz Hotel. A café parisien, decorated in the style of a French sidewalk cafe.
Cute.
There's photos of that on the drive too. Complete with ivy-colored trellises and wicker furniture. And there was a veranda cafe where tea and light refreshments were served that offered grand views of the ocean. At 114 feet long by 92 feet wide, the dining saloon on D deck was the largest room afloat and could seat almost 600 passengers at a time to dine.
Gross.
Yeah, that's way too many people.
No.
Obvi, like I said, there are tons of photos on the drive, including the iconic first-class staircase upon which Rose sees Jack in a tux and tails looking like an absolute snack, and they lock eyes, and in that moment, she realizes she is completely in love with him.
I love that scene. I also love that scene when recreated by that black cat on Instagram.
Yep, with a cat. Yep. Mm-hmm. So the Titanic and the Olympic were the largest ships that any shipbuilder had ever attempted at that time. Now it's like cruise ships are a dime a dozen, but whatever. Mm-hmm. They were built at the same time and took just over 2 years to complete. Quote, the work of constructing the ships was difficult and dangerous. For the 15,000 men who worked at Harland and Wolff at the time, safety precautions were rudimentary at best.
Oh.
A lot of the work was carried out without equipment like hard hats or hand guards on machinery.
Oh my God. Imagine the injuries.
Well, as a result, during Titanic's construction, 246 injuries were recorded, 28 of them, quote, severe, such as arms severed by machines or legs crushed under falling pieces of steel.
Oh!
6 people died on the ship herself while she was being constructed and fitted out, and another 2 died in the shipyard workshops and sheds, just like using the equipment.
Jesus.
Yep. Just before the launch of the Titanic, a worker was killed when a piece of wood fell on him and just crushed him.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And there are some, like, I found some rare photos of the Titanic, and there are some, like, under construction pictures. It's not
massive.
Yeah. It's not great. Like, it looks really fucking scary. No. Big hard pass. One of the defining features of the ship, of course, was its hull of compartments. So this is from history.com. Quote, it spanned 883 feet from stern to bow, and its hull was divided into 16 compartments that were presumed to be watertight.
Oh, no.
Because 4 of these compartments could be flooded without causing a critical loss of buoyancy, the Titanic was considered unsinkable, end quote. And it was also considered that even if it had it had overflowed into beyond 4 compartments of the 16, they believed that because of the way that the compartments were built, it would take days if they got into an accident for the Titanic to sink. And as we know now, it took hours, and we'll get to why.
Wow. Weird.
Yeah.
So these hulls are just filled with air. It's just the air cushioning. It's the hull.
Yep. They're just empty, and they basically fitted these like 16 separate like doors that were supposed to be watertight so that if they sprung a leak, they could seal off the remainder of the doors, and that leak could be contained within those compartments of the hull until rescue could come, or they could get ashore.
Great.
And keep the boat itself buoyant so that it doesn't go to the bottom of the fucking Atlantic.
Yep. Okay. Oh.
So in 1909, the Titanic was nearly complete, and in 1911, it was deemed ready for a sea test. This test wasn't actually done until April of 1912, only 8 days before her maiden voyage was scheduled to take off. So it was scheduled to take off on April 10th, 1912, and they did their sea test on April 2nd.
Okay.
So this is again from Wikipedia. The sea trials consisted of a number of tests of her handling characteristics carried out in Belfast and then in the open waters of the Irish Sea. Over the course of about 12 hours, Titanic was driven at different speeds, her turning ability was tested, and a crash stop was performed in which the engines were reversed full ahead to full astern, bringing her to a stop in 850 yards or 3 minutes and 15 seconds. So like that all checked out. They were like, okay, this emergency stopping works. We can come to a full stop within 3 minutes and 15 seconds. That's pretty good for a ship that size.
Yeah.
The ship covered a distance during this test of about 80 nautical miles, which is 92 land miles. I don't really know why they're different, but water is crazy. Averaging 18 knots, which is about 21 miles an hour, and reaching a maximum speed of just under 21 knots, which is like 24 miles an hour. On returning to Belfast at about 7 p.m., the surveyor signed an agreement and account of voyages and crew, valid for a year, which declared the ship seaworthy. Then, on April 10th, 1912, Jack won his steerage ticket in that poker game, and off he went.
With his cute Italian friend.
So cute. So the ship sailed without incident for 5 days before it, obviously, as we know, hit an iceberg that would be her downfall. At 11:40 p.m. on the 14th of April, lookout Frederick Fleet spotted an iceberg immediately ahead of the Titanic and alerted the bridge. And there's a photo on the drive of the iceberg that is presumed to be the one that sank the Titanic.
It's horrifying. It's big.
Yeah. I mean, it looks big, but in the world of icebergs, it's like not that crazy. And obviously, as we know,
there's a lot more underneath.
It's what's below, yeah, and not above.
Well, she's sturdy. I think the fact that most of it is below means that it doesn't move.
Yep.
You don't just hit it and it just gets out of your way.
Right. Well, I mean, there are theories on that, but yes. So first officer,
right
ahead. Ugh, sorry.
Cute.
First Officer William Murdoch ordered the ship to be steered around the obstacle and the engines to be reversed, but it was too late. The starboard side of the Titanic struck the iceberg, creating a series of holes below the waterline. The hull was not punctured by the iceberg, but rather dented in such a way that the hull's seams buckled and separated, allowing water to rush into the hull. 5 of the ship's watertight compartments were breached like immediately. And we already
knew
know
that 4 was the max.
4 was kind of the max to not be in an emergency situation.
Oh no.
It soon became clear that the ship was doomed as she could not survive more than 4 compartments being flooded. The Titanic began sinking bow first, with water spilling from compartment to compartment as her angle in the water became steeper, and the compartments were not built like floor to ceiling airtight. They had gaps over the top because nobody ever, like, they didn't imagine
that it would tilt,
that it would even fill that high.
Wow. Or tilt to that degree.
Right.
Oh no.
Like, that wasn't even on their radar.
Oh no.
So water spilling from compartment to compartment as her angle in the water becomes steeper. And by early morning on April 15th, she had split in half, as we know, and begun to like truly sink to the bottom of the ocean. The ship, this is so fucked up. So the ship was built to hold enough lifeboats for only half of those on board, but they didn't include all of the lifeboats that it was built to hold. So I saw some reports that said it only had 16 lifeboats.
Oh, that held like 20 people apiece.
I mean, more than that, because there were enough survivors that, but like, I don't know exactly how many there were, but there were enough for like basically a third of the people.
Son of a bitch.
Yeah. And
wait, why were there so many fewer than like half?
There's no regulation, and they wanted to save space for amenities. And if they had the adequate amount of lifeboats, they would have had to cut back on other like flashy
Your Parisian cafe.
Yeah, other flashy shit wouldn't have fit. And that was their priority. Yeah. Not only that, but the crew had not been properly trained for a full-scale evacuation. So like the poor fucking security guard who didn't even know about the button. Mm-hmm. Most of this crew wasn't even on board during the sea test, and the maiden voyage was their first time ever on the ship, and they didn't know the evacuation protocol. They just didn't know it.
Oh.
Lifeboats were launched half full, prioritizing first class and essentially ignoring third class passengers and crew members down below.
Or second class.
Yep.
Presumably.
Yep. About 705 of the 2,200 on board survived and were rescued by the Carpathia, which was ironically a ship by the rival Cunard Line.
Oh.
And they were taken to New York, which was Titanic's original destination, while more than 1,500 people died, and we don't have like the exact count because there's not a perfect record of how many crew members were on board. You know, there's a more
how many
perfect
bodies
record.
were recovered.
Well, and we'll get to the bodies, but yeah. So of the 1,500 minimum who died, the captain of the Titanic was one of them, and his last words were, quote, "Well, boys, you've done your duty and done it well. I ask no more of you. I release you. You know the rule of the sea. It's every man for himself now, and God bless you."
Ugh.
Yep.
Jesus
so
Christ.
Of the over 1,500 people who died, only 306 bodies were found after the sinking.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. So many families never even had the chance to put their loved ones to rest.
So they just sank, went down with the ship, were eaten or whatever. They just never fucking found them.
It's 1912. How are they gonna recover all that? They fished out enough like frozen people from the water, but
they still haven't found any more.
I don't think so. Well, by the time we have the technology to like really do some serious exploration of the wreckage, decades have passed, and you're in a current in the vast ocean with all manner of sea life nibbling at you. Yeah. It's not, it's not like being at the bottom of a lake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ugh.
But just how did this...
having found nothing, though, is sort of surprising.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's probably, like, some remains that were recovered, but there was no, like, DNA database. Like, how are you going to know who they belong to?
Right. Not who they belong to, but just like, oh, here's...
Who are they?
One.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, I don't know.
I just think it would be almost impossible to recover.
Yeah. Jesus.
So how did this unsinkable ship go down from an engineering perspective? Well, we all know the like theory about the impact with the iceberg that was like kind of a mess, that if the ship had like powered through head on, there might have been less damage. But we can't confirm that, and there's also more to it than that.
Instead of like swiping the whole side?
Exactly. They could have gone through it and maybe like broken it up.
Maybe.
But it's hard to know. It's really hard to know because then it could have just scraped both sides. Like, we don't know.
It could have, just like hit the whole front of the boat. Like, just, I don't know. Yeah.
Who fucking knows? So I'm not an engineer, so I'm going to be reading directly from an article explaining the engineering failures of the Titanic from mechhead.com. Quote, on an expedition in 1991, to the Titanic wreck, scientists discovered a chunk of metal, scientists meaning Bill Paxton.
Yes, of course.
Discovered a chunk of metal lying on the ocean floor, the heart of the ocean, that once was part of the Titanic's hull. The frisbee-sized piece of steel was an inch thick with 3 rivet holes, each 1.25 inches in diameter. Since the retrieval of this piece of steel, extensive research has been done to uncover additional clues to the cause of the rapid sinking of the Titanic. When the Titanic collided with the iceberg, the hull steel and the wrought iron rivets failed because of brittle fracture. This is a type of catastrophic failure in structural materials. Brittle fracture occurs without prior plastic deformation and at extremely high speeds. The causes of brittle fracture include low temperature.
Ooh, like the O-rings.
The O-rings, yep. High impact loading and high sulfur content. On the night of the Titanic disaster, each of these 3 factors was present. The water temperature was below freezing. The Titanic was traveling at a high speed on impact with the iceberg. And the hull steel contained high levels of sulfur.
Oh, shit.
The first hint that brittle fracture of the hull steel contributed to the Titanic disaster came following the recovery of that piece of the hull steel from the Titanic wreck in 1991. So it had been like almost 100 years before we even had this fucking technology to get this information.
Dang.
Yep. After cleaning the piece of steel, the scientists noted the condition of the edges. Jagged and sharp, the edges of the piece of steel appeared almost shattered like broken china. Also, the metal showed no evidence of bending or deformation. Typical high-quality ship steel is more ductile and deforms rather than breaks. The material used in Titanic showed brittle properties under the cold weather temperatures that caused that catastrophic failure.
Wow. This is why it's important for engineers to study the materials.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So the wrought iron rivets that fastened the hull plates to the Titanic's main structure also failed because of brittle fracture from the high impact loading of the collision with the iceberg and the low temperature water on the night of the disaster. So not only was like the steel was shitty, the rivets holding everything together also were shitty in those conditions.
I mean, it might have been the same material.
Yeah. Yep. So with the ship traveling at nearly 25 miles per hour, the contact with the iceberg was probably a series of impacts that caused the rivets to fail either in shear or by elongation. As the iceberg scraped along sections of the Titanic's hull, the rivets were sheared off, which opened up riveted seams and let all that water in.
Oh my God.
So it's like all these little, and there's so much pressure because it's so much water that like all these little cuts all along the side of it and these popped rivets was enough to let all that fucking water in. And then the surrounding steel that the rivets are attached to was also brittle. So it was essentially like they were saying it was exploding like China, like it was just breaking apart.
And also, I can imagine, I don't know about like all the properties of steel and iron and all that, but as it's like scraping along, like the vibrations between all of the materials probably aided in all of that destruction.
Oh, yeah. Probably did not help at all.
Whoa.
So along with the material failures, poor design of the watertight compartments in the Titanic's lower section was also a factor in the disaster. The lower section of the Titanic was divided into 16 major watertight compartments, as we mentioned, that could easily be sealed off if part of the hull was punctured and leaking water. After the collision with the iceberg, the hull portion of 6 of these 16 compartments was damaged, and sealing off the compartments was completed immediately after the damage was realized. But as the bow of the ship began to pitch forward from the weight of the water in that area of the ship, the water in some compartments began to spill over into adjacent compartments.
Oh my fucking God, because of those gaps.
Yep. Although the compartments were called watertight, they were actually only watertight horizontally and not vertically. Their tops were open and the walls extended only a few feet above the water line.
Son of a bitch.
The sinking of the Titanic has become one of the most well-known disasters in history because of the terrible loss of life and the demise of what everyone believed was an unsinkable ship. People are intrigued and curious about what caused the rapid sinking of the Titanic. The failure of the hull steel resulted from brittle fractures caused by the high sulfur content of the steel, the low temperature water on the night of the disaster, and the high impact loading of the collision with the iceberg.
Wow.
Yeah. So when the Titanic hit the iceberg, the hull plates split open and continued cracking as the water flooded the ship because now there's more pressure and more cold water inside of the hull. So it just kept causing these little like explosions of brittle steel.
Oh my God.
Can you even fucking imagine? Like, think of the sound that would be making.
My first thought was how fucking loud.
Yeah.
Especially down below for the third class passengers and steerage and like all the people working on the ship.
Yup.
Like,
and they're trapped down there.
Yeah.
They're not getting out. They're not getting out. They're drowning.
Oh God.
Yep. So other engineers agree with this assessment. Charles Murray wrote for Design News in 2015 that, quote, cold temperatures caused the hull of the RMS Titanic to fail, but with better metallurgy and metallurgy. I have a metal allergy. And connector technology, Titanic's hull might have remained intact. End quote. Which alludes to the fact that, yes, there were engineering failures here, but many of them were due to a lack of understanding and technology that's commonplace today. So, like, there were things that I think could have been conceived of that were not. And that part of the design was indeed an engineering failure. But these were the materials of the time that they had to work with. Like, they weren't necessarily assessing the sulfur content of the steel that they're using. While I would imagine they are factoring in temperatures, because that's a little bit more basic science, there's still so much more science that we have access to now that engineers can use to be like, under this circumstance, this could happen, and under this circumstance, this could happen.
Yeah.
So it's like a little bit of, we just didn't fucking know and did the best we could, and a little bit of, we tried to build this grandiose thing in 2 years, and we got a little too big for our britches, and this design was actually kind of dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's not like they could have experimented with, like, I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about here, but bear with me.
Like a crash test dummy for a car.
Well, like a lower oxide containing version of steel versus like this and like different.
Yeah, they didn't have access to that kind of.
No, there was like one option.
Right. So, I mean, I don't know. It's fucking tragic at the end of the day. There's nothing we could do about it. It was hundreds, over 100 years ago, but,
But this also kind of goes into what I was sort of talking about with engineering ethics.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do you draw the line between something that was like unavoidable, unforeseeable, and
when the design
negligent
itself was also kind of fucking negligent. It I'm sorry, the lifeboats alone.
That is fucked up.
That's negligence. Choosing more room for amenities rather than equipping it with enough lifeboats for even half of the people on board. Like,
Yeah.
it
was a third.
They
It was
put
a
enough on
little
there for
more
a
than a
third.
third.
Yeah, because they got cocky and they were like, we built this unsinkable ship. We're not even going to fucking need these anyway.
Yeah, but at the same time, the gaps at the top of the hull with all these
Negligent.
compartments. I don't even
Negligent.
know if that
They
was
weren't truly
negligent. It was just a
watertight.
design failure.
I know, but
well-
I don't know. It could be both.
It could be both, but then also like the material, the rivets and the steel and the blah, blah, blah.
That's
I
a little
think-
bit more unavoidable for the time.
But it's all a spectrum, like maybe not
Oh,
the
yeah.
lifeboat thing, but like
so much was going wrong with the time. She was doomed from
so
the start.
much was going on. Like
Yeah.
what we were saying, there are so many people top to bottom
Yep.
working on this, overseeing it, funding it.
15,000 people worked on building this boat.
That was a political issue in itself. Like it's all the more money
It's capitalism. They were
that's
trying
tied
to beat.
into it.
Yeah. They
Yeah.
were trying to keep up with and then surpass their competitor. And they
Didn't
dropped some balls along the way.
Jesus Christ.
I mean, they surpassed them in most famous shipwreck.
Yeah.
So that's pretty tight.
Yeah.
And of course, last but not least, I couldn't talk about the Titanic without mentioning the unsinkable Molly Brown, who inspired Unsinkable Helen's nickname.
Yes.
And I have a fun fact. Helen was born 5 years to the day after the Titanic sank, April 15th.
I didn't know that was her birthday.
Her birthday was April 15th, 1917, 5 years to the day. Yep. Yep. God bless her, Unsinkable Helen. So
Oh, God.
Molly was born, well, her name is Margaret, and most people called her Maggie, but then she just ended up with this like posthumous nickname, even though like no one called her Molly during her life, but whatever. She was born in 1867 and lived until 1932, so 65 years old. She was a socialite who was expected to marry rich, but ended up marrying for love. She famously said, quote, "I wanted a rich man, but I loved Jim Brown. I thought about how I wanted comfort. I thought about how I wanted comfort for my father and how I had determined to stay single until a man presented himself who could give to the tired older man the things I longed for him." So she wanted her dad to have like a comfortable retirement.
Yeah.
But Jim was as poor as we were and had no better chance. I struggled hard with myself in those days. I loved Jim, but he was poor. Finally, I decided that I'd be better off with a poor man that I loved than with a wealthy one whose money had attracted me. So I married Jim Brown.
Aw. She
They
ended
ended
up
up-
rich as fuck anyway.
Well, yeah, they ended up really well off through with success in the mining industry. He was working with Ibex Mining Company and doing such instrumental work for the mining industry itself. I don't know if he was an engineer or what. I didn't go down this rabbit hole because my case is already really long. But he was so like integral to that company that he was awarded over 12,000 shares in the company and given a seat on the board. So he like really made a name for himself in mining, and it blew up this industry.
Love it.
So during this time, Molly dedicated her life to supporting the mining families, specifically making sure they were fed and properly cared for. She and JJ actually divorced before she got on the Titanic because she loved the socialite life and he didn't.
Ooh,
So she was like,
Molly.
if you're not going to be coming out with me on your arm, I got to go. So they broke up. Yeah.
Margaret.
She boarded the Titanic a free agent. She famously begged those aboard her lifeboat to go back to the wreckage and look for survivors, but those aboard refused. I think they kind of used artistic license in the movie. I don't know if it was her boat that went back. Is anyone alive out there? Scene.
No, that was just a rescue boat, but
Okay.
she was in the boat saying like,
Saying,
"Yeah, we can
"Go
go
back."
back. We can fit more people." And then they just didn't.
because her boat was like half full.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh God, I gotta watch this tonight. She
I only
spent-
want to watch the first tape. The second tape is too sad.
I'm gonna watch it all. So she spent the remainder of her life after surviving the wreckage, fighting for workers' rights and also heavily involved in women's suffrage. And there are a couple photos of her on the drive, both of which she is in a fabulous hat. One, she is presenting a Trophy Cup award to Carpathia Captain Arthur Henry Roston for his service in the rescue of the Titanic.
That hat is amazing.
And then the other one, the Mrs. J.J. Brown one, where she looks like she's rolling her eyes. That is what she was wearing the day she got off of the Carpathia after surviving this ordeal on the Titanic.
Are you fucking kidding?
Nope,
Wait,
that's a photo.
That's the same hat.
Yeah, probably. She probably put that hat back on to be in this ceremony.
It's the same outfit.
Good for her.
It's the same blouse.
I get it. If I was wearing that when I was rescued, or on like the day that I made it to land, because obviously they were on the Carpathia for several days. So I don't even know if those were like all.
I think
she
it
probably
was the
grabbed a
same
bag.
damn day.
It might have been the same damn
She's
day.
making the same face. She's got the exact same outfit on.
I love her. She's amazing.
Wow.
And that is the engineering failures of the Titanic.
Damn.
I know, right?
Well, as if our listeners did not need another reason to not go on
Stay
a
off of
cruise
cruise
ship.
ships, people. It's not worth it.
Don't
God.
ever go on a cruise ship.
It's not worth it.
Good job, Jesus. I
Thank
didn't realize
you.
how much negligence went into that tragedy.
I know. It's
Good to
pretty
know.
sad. The fucking lifeboats, it gets me. That gets me every time.
That is just, it's cruel.
It's really cruel. It's
It
really
was
fucked up.
So avoidable.
Yep. Well, I sure hope you liked that clip. If you did like that clip, make sure you are subscribing to our YouTube channel, leaving us a nice review, and joining us on Patreon for even more video content, audio content, salacious content all around. Come join us. Treat yourself.